Shana Tova, this is the talk that I hope to give on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, 5785, 2024. Since I learned about Yuval Biton, I think of him often. There are a number of stories that help us shape our understanding of the horrible war between Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran. There's so much death, and so much destruction, and so much tension, and so much hate. There's moral certainty, and there's moral ambiguity, and then there's Dr. Yuval Biton. Some of you might know of him. In the avalanche of news, I missed his story until recently. It was a story that he was reluctant to tell for some time, but now he speaks publicly. He was a dentist who worked in the Israeli prison system. He thought he'd be treating guards and employees, but he ended up treating prisoners, and not mere criminals, but hardened offenders. He's Yitzhak Rabin's assassin, bus bombing technicians, the Park Hotel Passover Seder bombing planners, Hamas fighters. As a dentist in Israel, Biton also received general medical training. He'd be pulled in for consults with other doctors working on difficult cases. So one case in 2004 involved a prisoner serving 4 life sentences for killing 4 Palestinians he suspected of collaborating with Israel. Not his first stint in an Israeli prison, he had been in before, having built a reputation for barehanded murder and tortured, coarse confessions from his fellow Gazans. It was Yehia Sinwar, today world famous as a mastermind of the October 7th attacks, the commander of Hamas in Gaza, and the last word in hostage negotiating. Dr. Biton was fluent in Arabic, and after 15 years in prison, Sinwar is fluent in Hebrew. Biton was concerned that Sinwar suddenly didn't recognize him, and the New York Times reported. Sinwar would stand for prayer and then fall. As he spoke, he seemed to drift in and out of consciousness. But for Dr. Biton, the most telling sign was Mr. Sinwar's complaint of a pain in the back of his neck. Something's wrong with his brain, the dentist told his colleagues. Perhaps a stroke or an abscess. He needed to go to the hospital urgently. Sinwar was rushed to the nearby Soroka Medical Center, where doctors performed emergency surgery to remove a malignant and aggressive brain tumor, fatal if left untreated. If it had not been operated on, it would have burst, Dr. Biton said. A few days later, Dr. Biton visited Mr. Sinwar in the hospital together with a prison officer sent to check the security arrangements. They found the prisoner in bed, hooked up to monitors and IV, but awake. Mr. Sinwar asked the officer, who was Muslim, to thank the dentist. Sinwar asked him to explain to me what it means in Islam that I saved his life, Dr. Biton recalled. It was important to him that I understood from a Muslim how important this was in Islam, that he owed me his life. It's all a quote from the New York Times. Dr. Biton moved into intelligence in the prison system, eventually spending hundreds of hours, he says, in conversations with Sinwar. When it was proposed that Sinwar be one of the 1,100 Palestinian prisoners swapped for the kidnapped then Corporal Gilad Shalit, held by Hamas, Biton opposed the deal. Sinwar had told Biton he would kill 100,000 Palestinians if he could use their deaths to strike a blow against Israel. Sinwar opposed the deal as well. 1,100 for one was too cheap. He'd hold Shalit until all the Palestinian prisoners were released. Over Biton and Sinwar's objections, the deal went through. Different story. Tamir Adar was 38 years old, a farmer at Kibbutz Nir Oz, near the Gaza border. When the alarm sounded at 6:30 a.m. on October 7th, he took a sidearm and told his wife and 2 children to go into the safe room. When the IDF finally rescued his family at 4 p.m., Tamir was missing, like 1/4 of Nir Oz's residents. He had been kidnapped or murdered. Tamir's mother, Yael, called her brother, Dr. Yuval Biton. Your nephew Tamir is missing. Tamir's paternal grandmother, 85-year-old Yafa Adar, had been thrown on a golf cart and kidnapped into Gaza, proudly recorded on video by her captors. You saw the images. She was released in a later hostage for prisoner exchange, but Biton knew Sinwar well enough to know that his nephew Tamir would not be so fortunate. Tamir Adar was wounded on October 7th, taken hostage and dragged into Gaza. In early January, Israeli intelligence informed his family that Tamir had died soon after his kidnapping. Yuval Biton, the man who Yehia Sinwar credits with saving his life, kept his mouth shut. But his sister, of course, knew her brother saved her son's killer. We live in a world of moral challenges. Do we live our highest ethical ideals? How much can we compromise on our ideals without our ideals being buried under the rubble of Hamas's Gaza? Who by fire, who by water? Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes, there's an important thought experiment devised by Andrew Schmuckler, known as the parable of the tribes. Imagine a group of tribes living close to one another. All choose the way of peace except one that is willing to use violence to achieve its ends. What happens to the peace-seeking tribes? One is defeated and destroyed. A second is conquered and subjugated. A third flees to some remote and inaccessible place. If the fourth seeks to defend itself, it too will have recourse to violence. The irony is that a successful defense against a power-maximizing aggressor requires a society to become more like the society that threatens it. Power can be stopped only by power. There are, in other words, 4 possible outcomes. 1, destruction. 2, subjugation. 3, withdrawal. 4, imitation. Recall that all but one of the tribes seeks peace and has no desire to exercise power over its neighbors. Nonetheless, if you introduce a single violent tribe into the region, violence will eventually prevail, however the other tribes choose to respond. That is the tragedy of the human condition. And Rabbi Sachs continues, he says, as I was writing this essay in the summer of 2014, Israel was engaged in a bitter struggle with Hamas in Gaza, in which many people died. There can be situations in which there is no right course of action, where whatever you do is wrong, where every option will involve the abandonment of some moral principle. That is Schmuckler's point, that power is like a contaminant, a disease, which once introduced will gradually but inexorably become universal in the system of competing societies. Not unlike that cancer in Sinwar's brain. Violence defiles us all. It did then, the time of the Torah. It does now. Sinwar and Hamas have power, responsibility, and agency. So does Netanyahu in Israel. How will that power be used? Brain surgery, surgical strikes, or executions in subterranean tunnel networks? Does a power differential affect the moral calculus? Palestinians are fewer, with fewer resources than the Israelis. But then, once one acknowledges that Hamas and Hezbollah are Iranian proxies, Israel is smaller, with fewer resources than the network that opposes it. Iran seeks to use Hamas and Hezbollah to eliminate Israel. It said that Iran is willing to fight Israel down to the last Arab. In that lens, the folly of determining morality based on power versus powerlessness, oppressor versus oppressed falls apart. The mullahs in Iran, like Sinwar hiding underground in Gaza, work to ensure that Palestine will never be free, though all peoples merit freedom. The status quo is untenable. Violence defiles us all. Micha Goodman, an Israeli public intellectual in the days just after October 7th, said that to survive, Israel needs to be loved in the West and feared in the Middle East. Brain surgery for your enemy at the height of the Second Intifada is the kind of moral act that makes one loved. Valuing a life so much that one swaps out 1,100 prisoners for a single hostage. We saw ethics. Sinwar smelled weakness, a soft underbelly that could be struck. Sinwar's game, Iran's game, drags Israel down quite literally into darkness, both moral darkness and into the vast tunnel network Hamas built with humanitarian donations. How does one protect one's own people while still honoring the foundational principle that all human beings are created in the image of God, equally, infinitely valuable? So many protesters willing to be pawns in Hamas's cynical game are willing to protect Palestinian lives down to the last Israeli. Israel's government has nothing in common with Hamas, but does include extremists who are not committed to the democratic rule of law or peaceful coexistence. But finding points of cooperation with people one disagrees with is an essential part of democracy. As Reb Springsteen said, what if you do to survive kills the thing you love? Think for a moment of the Torah readings we encounter on Rosh Hashanah. In one, a revered matriarch Sarah asks for Hagar and Ishmael to be kicked out of the house, exiled to the desert. Abraham's upset, but God tells him to comply. Today, The Akedat Yitzchak, the command to offer Isaac as a sacrifice, to which Abraham wordlessly complies. Stories of Jacob hustling Esav out of his birthright, Rebekah's plan to have Jacob trick his blind father Isaac out of the blessing, Jacob's sons Shimon and Levi avenging the rape of their sister Dinah by deceiving and murdering a town full of innocent people. Joseph, himself a victim several times over, enslaves the Egyptians for Pharaoh. That's just Genesis, and it ain't the half of it. All the rabbi-splaining in the world can't make King David a moral paragon. Why are all the biblical heroes morally compromised? Why isn't anyone clean? The stories are morally challenging because our lives are morally challenging. The characters are imperfect because we are imperfect. No one is clean because no one is clean. We all have repenting to do. Not just them. Us. Not just me. You. The good contains the bad. The bad contains the good. There's a serpent in the Garden of Eden. That doesn't mean we're supposed to be okay with moral failings. We're commanded to pursue justice, to pursue peace, and have and respect fair and impartial courts. And we do so knowing we have a goal as well. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, the Torah commands. Justice, justice you shall pursue. The line goes on. Lam'an tiyeh ve'arasta et ha'aretz asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha. In order that you thrive and inherit the land that Adonai your God is giving you. Justice is being pursued in order to set up a good society in the land of Israel. If you want a better outcome in a broken world, sadly, there is no perfect way of doing it. That does not give moral license. Making the trains run on time does not justify moral failings. It means we don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. The Kuzari is a 12th century work of philosophy by the masterful Spanish poet Yehuda Halevi. He imagines a debate with a rabbi, a priest, and an imam, not in a bar, but in front of the king of the Khazars, a faraway kingdom, where the king is said to have interviewed leaders of these three religions, and whoever convinced him, he and his kingdom would convert. The rabbi argues that since Islam has been violent since the days of Muhammad, and Christianity talks a good game but has a long history of violent abuse of power, peaceful Judaism is clearly superior. This might be so, if your humility were voluntary, says the king, but it is involuntary, and if you had power, you too would kill. When Jews were powerless, we could play innocent. The Khazar king is right to say morality when you're powerless is easy, but not meaningful. When you have an army and an enemy, then call me. On October 7th, the IDF was absent and Israelis were victims, and sympathy and support were widespread. But there is an Israeli army and power, and the Jewish state did not long play the victim, so the sympathy and the support dried up. The Hartman Institute's Yossi Klein Halevi acknowledges this from an Israeli perspective. He says, this is one consequence of what power looks like. There's the ability to make sure that October 7th doesn't happen again. But one of the consequences is the ruins of Gaza. And so, was it worth it or not? This is the Kuzari moment. What happens when we have an army? And not only what happens when you have an army, but what happens when you have an army with October 7th. What happens when you've already gone through 2,000 years of Jewish history? You finally come home and it doesn't end. The war against Jewish legitimacy and Jewish existence continues. Those are the conditions in which the morality of Jewish power are being tested, Halevi says. And I would argue that it is one of the ultimate tests any people could confront. End quote. Power brings moral challenges. Should Gaza be in ruins? Should Dr. Yuval Biton and his colleagues have saved Yehia Sinwar's life? Should Israel have swapped 1,100 prisoners for Gilad Shalit in 2011? What are the violence of so many wars, including the grim toll that comes with Hamas and Hezbollah's human shield strategy? If this is a just war, does that mean that it is being fought justly? As Rabbi Sachs says, violence defiles us all. And as the imaginary Khazar king says, saying you believe in peace when you do not have the power to act in any event is really nonsense, even if you have catchy rhyming slogans. And as Klein Halevi says, better to not be a powerless victim, even if power brings the responsibilities of life and death. That is the world of moral challenge and of moral responsibility. The world of Dr. Yuval Biton, and of Biton's nephew, Tamir Adar, Zichrono Livracha, and of Tamir's grandmother, Yafa Adar, and of us. We live in that world. Because Yafa Adar was 85, with the attendant health issues, the years accumulate. She was involved in a prisoner for hostage exchange after 49 days of captivity in Gaza. Her strength is evident. You can see her in an interview saying that October 7th erased all that is good in life, crying in her bed. And charmingly, for a secular Jewish Israeli, watching the opera singer Andrea Bocelli on YouTube singing the Lord's Prayer. In the same interview, not yet knowing that her grandson survived mere hours in Gaza, she pleads for his return. And it becomes clear. We must take risks for good. We must take risks for security. We must take risks for hope. And we must embrace the moral ambiguities of power and reject the simple pieties of victimhood and the idea that those with less power are somehow more moral. That's not the way the world works. Our prayers yearn for a world where good is rewarded with good, evil punished. But there are prayers. Our prayers remind us that we yet live in a world of who by fire, who by water. And because we live in that world, we will still live lives of tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, of return, of prayer, justice, and charity, come what may. Shana tova tikatevu. May you and your loved ones be inscribed for a good year, a year of life and of more peace. Shalom.